Every indoor climber knows that outdoor climbing is bloody hard, but I'm here to fix that. The first time I went outdoor climbing, I got totally spanked on a 6A+. At the time, I was climbing 7B indoors, and it was mortifying. I had this idea that I was going to rock up to the crag and totally own the place like Chris Sharma did when he was a youth. But I didn't. Instead, I totally bottled it. I was devastated, but certainly not put off, and I wanted to go away and learn how to be a better outdoor climber. Fast forward 15 years, and I've done a few more outdoor climbs, and had some success with it. And in that time, I've learned essentially what it takes to be a great outdoor climber that I'm going to share with you guys today. Now, there are no magic tricks. All right, maybe a few, but today I want to share with you the 5 biggest things I've learned that have helped me and many others achieve in the world of outdoor climbing. But before we get started, why is it so hard to transition from indoor climbing to outdoors? Well, firstly, indoor footholds are very different. They're generally a lot bigger and they often stick out from the wall more. Whereas on rock, you can get pockets and inset features, which on the whole are way harder to use. Also, rock has a different texture. It can be slick, but it can also be very jagged and painful at times, making a quick transition from indoors to out harder for some. Also, indoors, everything is colored, which makes seeing the holds a lot easier. But more than any of this, indoor route setting very rarely replicates outdoors, especially in modern climbing gyms. Volumes don't exist on rock, run and jumps are few and far between, and how many big blobby slopers do you get compared to crimps, pockets and little pinches? There are always exceptions, of course, but going from indoors to outdoors is rarely easy, even for the most seasoned rock climbers. So don't worry if you're finding it hard, I do too. So without further ado, let's discuss how we can become better rock climbers. From the second you start climbing, everyone says it's all in the feet. And I couldn't agree more. Although being strong is great, having good footwork and a keen understanding of technique means you can utilize strength even more so. But there's a difference between how you use your feet indoors compared to outdoors. Indoors, you learn a very tailored style of footwork that works really well for indoor climbing, but sadly, it doesn't work as well in rock. The first big difference between indoors and out is the number of options available. Indoors, you only have the fluorescent pink footholds to use, whereas on rock, you've got hundreds of little rocky jibs, smears and protrusions to potentially make use of. But you'd be amazed how few climbers make use of all these footholds. Especially indoor climbers who are used to doing larger foot movements and less of them when they go outdoors, they automatically look for the biggest footholds and try to skip their feet between them whilst avoiding anything small. It's understandable why, because indoors you don't even have to think where to put your feet because they're painted for you like a giant bullseye. When you don't have to think in this way about your feet, when you're suddenly faced with 1,000 options, it can feel confusing and overwhelming. So how do we fix this? Honestly, the best advice I can give you is to change your approach. You need to step away from looking for the most obvious footholds and instead focus on what foothold is best for your body position, as the biggest foothold isn't always in the best place. And it takes time and practice to consolidate this new mindset, but it's worth it in the long run. And a good way to start is by practicing a lot on lower grades, perhaps during your warm-up, or on an on-site crag day, or even on active rest days where you do lots of easier climbs. But if you want to practice indoors, then find a section of wall with a lot of holds, a high hold density, and do climbs on this, allowing yourself to use anything for feet. In doing so, over time, you'll naturally gravitate to placing your feet where they should be, rather than on the biggest foothold. The second piece of advice I'll give you is trying to consciously increase the number of foot movements per hand movement. Indoor climbers naturally do fewer foot movements than rock climbers, and as a result, when they go rock climbing, it looks much more powerful and upper body centric. Now, when I was younger, I was given this advice and started to implement it into my climbing, and almost instantly found that I was climbing more efficiently on rock. Not only that, but over time, it gives you a much keener understanding of how small, subtle movements and shifts in body position can have such a dramatic effect on your center of gravity and therefore lead to better movement efficiency. It might all be in the feet, but it's also in the hands. Psych! One of the biggest tricks I've learned about climbing harder on rock is learning how to hold handholds better. Compared to indoors, outdoor handholds are much more complex. There's so much texture and tiny imperfections that make using them harder for the inexperienced, but potentially so much easier for those that know what to look for. I'm going to say this now. The art of holding on is an advanced technique, so much so that I hardly ever hear people talking about it. So make sure you listen carefully to the points I'm going to say next. Firstly, use your thumbs. Your thumbs can make holding on easier. They can make rest better, and they can even give you more power. When I'm using handholds, I try and figure out where I want my thumb to go. Does it go behind the hold and pinch, or does it pinch in from the side? Which ripple does the thumb pinch against? Or can my thumb wrap over the side of the hold instead? One strategy I've used to enormous success is wrapping my thumb over the edge itself and allowing as much weight to be taken by the thumb to give my fingers much more of a rest. This can be really useful when resting because you want to try and ease pressure off the fingers so they can de-pump. This is a really advanced resting technique, but works so well when you master it. Also, for a cheeky hack in using your thumb to pinch, check out our 5 easy climbing hacks video and learn about the vice grip. Secondly, you don't know how to hold a hold unless you know where your index finger is. When I'm working hard routes and boulders, the key to making sure you always hit the best part of the hold is knowing where the index finger needs to be placed. When I find this out, I place a little tick mark next to where I know my index finger goes, and that sets things up perfectly for hitting that hold exactly where it needs to go. But sometimes it's not that simple. And so my last point is also the most complex, as occasionally the easiest way to hold a handhold isn't obvious. If you're struggling to hold on, take a closer look at the features around the hold and consider displacing your fingers in a way that might allow more surface contact for your fingertips. Sometimes this will mean dropping a pinky down on a little nubbin, or maybe, like in this video, you have to displace both sets of fingers to get the strongest position. Also, look how he's using his thumb to curl into the pocket. That will be easing pressure from his fingers as well. The technique of holding on is so underrated and misunderstood that I think it can mask how strong people actually appear. Someone with good hand technique can appear very strong to those with poor technique. I know this because I do it all the time and I have really weak fingers. On equal footing, someone with really poor hand technique will have to be much stronger to hold on. Spending lots of time on rock is really important for getting confidence outdoors, but it's how we use that time which allows us to get the most from it. Simply going climbing isn't enough, but neither is trying hard stuff. It's important to try a mix of grades, styles and rock types to give us variety and help develop a wide array of skills. To achieve this, I've always been a huge advocate of the pyramid plan, where the highest volume of climbs you do are lower grades, and then as you work up the grades, the pyramid narrows until you reach your max red point. The reason this plan works so well is because it makes sure you get enough volume of climbing across a wide spectrum of grades and styles, so you become a well-rounded climber. Also, if you look at how we as humans best learn, it's not just by trying things at our limit. Sure, that's part of it, but not the whole story. Imagine asking someone who's never played a violin in their life to play a really complex piece of music. How long until they learn how to play it? I guarantee you it will take a very long time. But studies have shown if they learn an easier piece of music first and then perhaps a slightly harder piece and build up slowly to the more advanced music, they will learn much quicker. It's the same in climbing, but that doesn't mean if you climb loads and loads of 6As, you'll eventually climb 9A. The climbing still has to be challenging for you, which is why I recommend thinking about it like this. If your hardest red point grade is 8A, then the top of your pyramid will be 8A to 8A+. The next tier will be 7C to 7C+, and the tier below that will be 7B to 7B+. The highest volume of climbing should be routes you're capable of on-sighting, but could still easily fall off. By training on-site skills, you're learning to think quickly and move intuitively, which is hugely important even in red pointing. If you fall off these on-sites, it's vitally important that you don't just give up, but instead learn why you fell off, practice the sequence, and try and complete the climb second go if possible. In the next tier up, these will be routes you probably won't be able to on-site, but always try anyway. These routes you'll want to try and complete as quickly as possible, so spend a lot of time on that first working go to give yourself the best chance of a quick red point. Learning how to red point hard routes fast is a skill, and this process will develop memory for sequences, problem solving, and quick thinking. Finally, the upper tier is for projects. You will generally spend the least amount of time on these throughout the season, but they're important because they help develop a keen eye for detail, as well as confidence and belief in your abilities to perform at that level, which will allow you over time to surpass it. For a real life example of this at work, all you have to do is look at Adam Ondra's 8A.NU profile. Look at this pyramid. 19C, 3 9B+, 29 Bs, 43 9A+, and he's got a solid foundation there in the lower 8s that helps to make him the best climber in the world. Whoa, Robbie, how can we make a climb easier? Do you want me to crack out the old hammer and chisel and shape these pockets into jugs? Not quite, mate. I know this sounds crazy, but bear with me. Have you ever heard the phrase, don't train hard, train smart? Just because we do lots of hard training doesn't mean we get stronger. We need to optimize our program to make it most effective. When we're approaching hard climbs, it's exactly the same. You need to find the right beta, use the right technique, and employ smart tactics to make that hard climb easier. When I approach a hard climb outdoors, I'm not just trying to pull hard, I'm trying to find the best beta to link hard sections, the best technique to make strenuous moves easier, and find tactical rest to help me recover. The most important part of making the climb easier is adopting the right mindset. This approach is great for indoors as well as outdoors, but because technique goes a lot further outdoors, you'll see a greater benefit by switching your mindset. From a very early stage, I was climbing with guys and girls who were much stronger, and as a result, I was trying boulder problems and sport routes that felt physically too hard for me. So what did I do? I made the climbs easier for myself. Instead of thinking I was too weak, I brought these climbs down to my level by finding the easiest way possible to climb them. This meant becoming a technician of movement and a surgeon when it came down to the tiny, subtle details of foot, body, and hand position. My objective on every climb is to find every possible rest, no matter how weird. If there's a crux, I want to know how to do it without pulling that hard. If there's a long, sustained, pumpy section, I want to know how to do it without getting that pumped. If it says 8B in the guidebook, I want it to feel 8A when I'm done. It's too easy these days to just say, I'm not strong enough. Wolfgang Gulich famously said, there's no such thing as too much power. That's true, but if you're using that power inefficiently, then you're wasting your potential. My mental approach to climbing in making every climb as easy as possible is not just a solution to climbing harder grades, but it's a mindset that will help hone your technique, develop your problem-solving abilities, and ultimately make you a much better climber in the long run who can use however much power they have in the most efficient way. My final quote to summarize this section was taken from Dave McLeod when he was sitting in my van after a day's climbing outdoors. Dave said to me, I want to be the weakest climber to have climbed Font 8C. I flippin' love that quote. So do I, Dave. So do I. I'm constantly blown away by the number of totally amazing climbing gyms that are opening up every year. Huge arenas with hundreds of boulders, lead lines, top ropes, circuits, and massive training areas seemingly the best facilities on earth to train for climbing hard on rock. And yet I feel that a lot of it has little to do with actual rock climbing. As I said at the start of this video, how many big blobs do you see at your local crag? Personally, I've rarely come across anything like it on rock. And what about the movement style? Are setters able to accurately replicate outdoor climbing moves at the gym? Truthfully, yeah they are, but they rarely do because it's just not that interesting. Rose moves are fun, but we don't do them that much on rock. Dynos and 360-degree spins and triple clutches and catches, blah, blah, blah. It's all great fun swinging around on blobs at indoor walls, but frankly, it's just not that very specific for the majority of climbs you do outside. So what's the answer? Well, we need to start training specifically. When we're outdoors, we're mainly using smaller handholds like crimps, pockets, and pinches. Climbing also tends to be less dynamic and with more fit movements. Outdoors, we just can't afford to be swinging around like a monkey high on a banana smoothie all day. So, my indoor training has become a lot more specific to my outdoor climbing. One of the best decisions I ever made over the last year was building my own board. It has all the holds I want and I can recreate outdoor moves easily. But of course, not everyone has the luxury to do this. So for those who train at a commercial climbing gym, just try to follow these simple rules. 1. Look for small holds. I generally focus on climbs with smaller handholds like crimps, pinches and pockets, and limit how many of the blobby problems I try. The blobby ones also use more hand skin than your fingertips, so best to save them until later in the session anyway. 2. Look for technical climbs. Try and climb problems that require a bit of technique and finesse to them rather than just pure thuggery. This will help you transition to that mindset of making climbs easier that I spoke of earlier. 3. Spend less time jumping. Dynos and run and jumps are fun, but don't spend all day doing them unless you're training for a competition. Jumping skills are important for outdoors too, but it's such a small part of our whole repertoire of climbing skills that spending too much time on it is just a waste of time. 4. Climb on all angles. Try and spend a fairly equal amount of time on all angles from slabs to roof. It's more common for stronger climbers to prefer swinging around on steep angles, but even I find the most outdoor climbs I do in the grade 8s and 514s are just over vertical to 30 degrees. This obviously depends on where you climb a lot, but I guarantee you that if you're climbing the 6s and 7s, especially, you won't be swinging around on a 45-degree angle very often. And finally, 5. This is more down to those training endurance on circuits or routes indoors, but slow the hell down. You climb so much slower on rock than you do indoors, and blasting up well-rehearsed indoor routes is anything but specific to the type of climbing you do outdoors. So those are my 5 secrets to climbing hard outdoors. They're certainly not magic, but they've helped me drag my big butt up a few things over the years. Of course, feel free to comment below on what your top tips for climbing hard outdoors are, and as always, like, subscribe, and ding that wee bell for notifications on when our next video is out. See you guys next time.